Really enjoyed your conversation with Evan Spiegel on stage. My favorite question was when you asked, how obsessed are you with Facebook? And he paused for a while before he answered it.
He had to pause because nowadays, Facebook and Amazon and Google in particular are so big and so creative and powerful that they could stymie competition. And it's always difficult to know how to deal with that. Jeff Bezos has a wonderful line that Steve Jobs and others have said as well, is that you shouldn't be obsessed with your competitors, you should be obsessed with your customers, and the rest will follow. And I think that's what Snap is going to do, is follow the lead of the customer who says, okay, I want to tell stories, okay, I want this new feature. And as long as they keep innovating, they'll stay a step ahead of Facebook.
Do you see a young Mark Zuckerberg and Evan Spiegel, or do you think they're not on the same plane?
Oh, I think Evan Spiegel and Mark Zuckerberg are deeply creative people who have a real feel for what users would want. I found Evan Spiegel to be deeply philosophical, smart, and have a great sense of leadership, which is, to me, the hardest thing. I mean, to lead a public company, that's even more difficult than creating a product. That's where Steve Jobs stumbled at one point, was he created really great products, but in about 1985 he was having trouble leading a public company, an Apple. And I think Evan Spiegel's getting over that hump. I'm deeply impressed with Evan Spiegel.
Facebook, Google, Twitter are in the crosshairs of the most important issues in the world right now. Fake news, the spread of misinformation, abuse.
Correct.
They're going before Congress now in this Russia probe. How serious is this?
It's very serious, and people have responsibility in this world. When I first went online, it was many years ago, and there was a service called The Well that was started by Stuart Brand and others. And the first words that came up were, you own your own words. In other words, you had to take responsibility for what you said. In the world now of Twitter and many other places, people can be anonymous. They can create fake news without any sense of responsibility on Facebook and Twitter. We saw that again happen in Las Vegas, but far worse, we saw it happen in the election. And I think the time has come where you can no longer say, oh, it's not our responsibility, we're just a platform.
So how do they rise to that? What do they do?
Well, it's easy. I mean, we've done it for 500 years, ever since Gutenberg invented the printing press, which is people take responsibility for what they publish. Now, that involves having humans in the mix, because with all due respect to artificial intelligence, algorithms can't do it perfectly. You need to say, here are values. You need to be able, people say, well, what's the difference between fake news and real news? And I say, if you have to ask that question, get out of the business. Go back to being a fisherman.
YouTube and Gmail are now at the center of this. Google has just recently pulled Russia Today from their premium ad packages. We've talked less about Google, but what about Google?
I think that one of the interesting things is that you want to balance the ability to have search, where you can have somebody can do a search and it's neutral. It doesn't sort of say we're going to bias this, that, or the other. But you also have to stop people who are putting up in the news feeds that will be searched by Google things that you know are incorrect and done intentionally incorrect. Certainly as a journalist, I know that we publish things that were incorrect in the past, sometimes things that were biased. But it wasn't done for some ulterior secret motive, and that's what's happening with fake news today. And I think you have to make that distinction if you're at Google. You have to say, all right, this thing about the Las Vegas shooter was just put up as pure fakery, and we have to find ways to get rid of that.
If indeed Facebook, Twitter, Google swayed the election in one direction or another, I mean, what is the recourse for that? What are the consequences?
Well, I think you have to look forward, which is you have to say, in this new environment, we're lucky. We used to have gatekeepers. Walter Cronkite would say that's the way it is, and most of the nation would say, okay, he's my gatekeeper. We're in a better world now, where I can go wherever I want, including, Russian sources or Syrian sources or Palestinian sources to get the news. But we have to say, you can't use our platform to intentionally mislead people. And as Mark Zuckerberg has said recently, we get it now. We kind of didn't do that all that well. And I suspect the people at Google are also have good values and are smart enough to figure out going forward, we're going to have to do it better.
Regulators are stepping in, especially in Europe. Do you think there's a reckoning coming for
I think
Facebook
in Europe
and Google
in particular, there's
and
a
Apple?
reckoning coming. I'm not somebody who's deeply in favor of on-the-spot regulations and government agencies trying to regulate information. I think that's a really, really bad idea, which is why I think it's a really good idea for Google and Facebook to step up and do it themselves.
So not law, self-policing, you think is what's necessary?
I think when you start having government laws telling you what information can flow, you're in a really bad place, which is why people who do get involved in the industry of the flow of information have to have certain values so that we don't have people saying we need the government to regulate the flow of information. I'm against the government regulating the flow of information.
It certainly requires a lot of trust in these companies, though.
It does, and they've lost that trust, and I think when they lose that trust, it's bad for them, so they should be trying to regain the trust, and I think they are trying to regain the trust.
You've got a new book coming out.
Of an original in the age of information
Yes.
and connecting information to technology, Leonardo da Vinci, because I've always, whether it's talk about Steve Jobs, Evan Spiegel, Mark Zuckerberg, but also Einstein, Ben Franklin, I've always loved people who stood at the intersection of the arts and technology, who believed that creativity came not just from engineering, but from engineering combined with our human idea of beauty. And Leonardo, especially with his, say, drawing of Vitruvian Man, the guy in the circle in the square, he was the ultimate symbol of connecting unbelievable beauty with a deep feel for nature's science.
So what would a Mark Zuckerberg or an Evan Spiegel or a Larry Page have to learn from the story of Leonardo da Vinci? What would modern day folks?
I'll just do it in 2 words, something Steve Jobs knew. Beauty matters. And when you're creating a product, whether it's a news search algorithm or an iPad, you have to say, I care about a human connection, and human connection begins with beauty. Leonardo got that.